Hello everyone, today I'm looking at Ninja Gaiden 4. Wow, what a wild effing ride. I was not expecting to really get into this game because I thought this was a Team Ninja game, but it turns out it is a return of Team Ninja, but along with Platinum Games. So Ninja Gaiden 4 is really, really good. But it does have some major issues I want to get into. But first off the bat, when I started up this game, I was transported to an absolute aesthetic. The game is bloody, grimy, intense, red and black aesthetic. It has that sort of a Matrix code going on in the background. It is the most, in another word, chuny experience I have ever played. The likes of Shadow the Hedgehog, Kill la Kill, any edgy teenage character, this is their dream game. When I played this game, I felt I was transported to be a 13-year-old, where I just wanted to make a cool assassin ninja guy who was like, didn't say a lot of words, and he was always, trying to save the girl and do the right thing, but he's also like tormented soul. It was just, it was Vincent from Final Fantasy VII. Like, it's just such another perfect example of an edge character. He is totally getting in to the pantheon of edge characters, and the main character's name is Yakumo. And so the way the game starts off is he's part of the Raven clan, and his job basically is to infiltrate this giant military base. You start on a train, similar to another Platinum game, and you basically have to save this dark dragon. Well, sorry, you go to kill the Dark Dragon Priestess, and she convinces you to really kill the Dark Dragon because it's been sealed by Ryu Hayabusa, but its sealed state is still causing demons and other things to appear in Tokyo. So in order to fully destroy it, they need to purify it. And so she says, if you really want to destroy the Dark Dragon, you have to actually break the seals, revive it, and then purify it. And so Yakumo's goal up until this point is to kill this person, and she convinces him, well, if you're lying, I'll just kill you. And she's like, okay, that's fine. So it seems super obvious she's going to betray you, and she says something else later that, oh yeah, the Dark Dragon resides within me. So it seems very obvious that she's tricking you, and I'll give them credit that eventually, later on in the story, that actually does not happen. It was a big switcheroo, and the fact that it's so telegraphed that this is such a bad idea, but what is the big switcheroo is that they don't actually follow through with it, that it actually is a genuine concern and the right thing to do. And it turns out why Ryu Hayabusa later in the story confronts you is for ulterior motives as well, which is basically just to test you, to make sure that Yakumo is ready for the fight. And yeah, besides that, the story is not super important here. It's very basic, very bare bones. You're there to basically kill a bunch of demons, and it is a high octane action game. Maybe I haven't played a Platinum game in a while. The last one I think I played was Bayonetta 3, which I absolutely loved. That is, shockingly, I would say the best Bayonetta game, maybe even more than 1. It's not as iconic as 1, but in terms of just basic combat and the selection and variety of skills is insane how much content is in that game. In this game, it definitely doesn't have as much content, but you don't really need more than what it's giving you. It's giving you a decent amount of complexity for Yakumo's moveset to make you feel really powerful as well as be really challenging. And so I can only really describe it as a perfect marriage of Team Ninja and Platinum Games. It's really strange that it's not like one more than the other. They still have all the very basic mechanics from Ninja Gaiden, like the wall climb, where you go bouncing in between the walls rapidly by mashing the A button. You also have things like the shurikens while jumping, the ability to jump off walls and do downwards powerful attacks. You have your light attack, powerful attack. You have the like all the basic moves are here. And later in the story, you also get to play as Ryu, and his moveset is basically the same, just in a Platinum engine. It's very interesting and very ambitious how they've made this really great action game. It's just so good. And along with Akumo being an edgelord, it feels like a self-contained universe or story almost. It definitely is part of the Ninja Gaiden lore and story, but it doesn't really change too much, except the fact that Yakumo is kind of destined to purify the Dark Dragon rather and finally defeat it rather than just seal it away like an infinite evil. The other thing that I also noticed is that there's a different variety of demons and fiends. So there's some fiends from the Ninja Gaiden series return, while demons are kind of new introductions, as well as the cyber warriors from the Divine Dragon organization that you have to fight. Very much resemble the enemies from Metal Gear Solid Rising. And so that is kind of what I would first say. When I say Platinum, I mean specifically Metal Gear Solid Rising Revengeance. This is really what felt like a sequel to that at first, and later on in the story, there's a certain part where you actually get to play as Ryu, and I thought, oh, okay, this is more like Devil May Cry 4, very appropriately, titled, because I thought this is so new and so different, they should call it Ninja Gaiden Neo or Zero or something like that. But with the switcheroo of the campaign to Ryu, I thought, okay, this is more like Devil May Cry 4, except for the fact that Ryu's stages actually last only a few. I thought you'd be backtracking through the whole game, redoing all the bosses, and you do redo all the bosses as Ryu, but the levels themselves are severely cut down, and what I thought was the halfway point was actually much, much sooner to the end of the game. So it's more like an honorary or honorific thing that it lets you get to play as Ryu in the game. But yeah, let's kind of dive into the gameplay here. So I mean, it's always been a weird thing to me that Ninja Gaiden has always been an Xbox first or Xbox exclusive property. I should probably look into why that is, because the original Ninja Gaiden being an Xbox exclusive, I guess it had something to do with the engine and how it was made, that they wanted to make an action game that ran as smooth as possible, and that's why they chose it rather than the kind of obvious PlayStation 2. Aside from that, so the button layout, I was playing this on, the Xbox Series X, and so the button layout, I guess, is more or less the same or similar in the sense that, you have your X light attack, Y strong attack, A to jump, B to throw shurikens, and again, it's not as heavy as Ninja Gaiden Black, and I don't think even Ninja Gaiden 2 is as heavy as Ninja Gaiden Black, and what I mean by that is there's just a lot of force, a lot of feedback. Ninja Gaiden Black, for the record, I never beat it. I got halfway, and I said, you know what? If this game doesn't have a really great story or a really great lore or aesthetic, if this is just simply an action game for the sake of an action game, I don't really want to, mess around with it too much, so to speak. So I never beat it. I beat like the final or like the mid-game boss, and I thought, okay, that was the hardest boss fight I have ever done in my life. I'm happy with my progress. I'm just gonna leave it here. And then you have this whole sequence where you have to like escape through these Egyptian ruins. I just wasn't interested. But anyway, so yeah, I mean the gameplay is very similar to, again, Revengeance combined with some Ninja Gaiden style attacks. They basically look exactly the same. It really is a great, I would say, adaptation in that sense. And the combat is just amazing. It's just really, really good. You also have execution style kills, which are just absolutely brutal, where you're like chopping guys' heads off and slicing them in half. It's funny that this kind of combat feels more at home in the Ninja Gaiden universe rather than the Metal Gear Solid universe. Seeing it right and slice guys in half, while something it did definitely happen in Metal Gear Solid 4 and other games, it just felt a little bit too brutal for Platinum's engine, but it's still a classic game. So you have not really too intense combos. You have very basic combos, which is like 3 X's and a Y and an air attack. And what's more so focused on is a family of different techniques or combos, mainly being forwards, backwards, X and Y, like a shuffle. Then you have a circular X and Y by drawing the control stick in a circle. And then you also have other things like pressing RB into Blood Raven mode and then following up with an X or Y. And you also have a very interesting combination where, again, you go in Blood Raven mode and you press A to jump, and then immediately follow up with a attack, X or Y, and that creates a really cool special effect. So the Blood Raven mode is basically the left trigger, and this is what activates Yakumo's kind of blood mode, or his extra mode, which is, designated by a meter. And that basically allows you to do the same attack, but supercharged. Well, it's basically a different attack, actually. It'll have a completely different pattern. It'll also have other things where, again, you'll have certain combos, like pressing RB and A in that mode, that'll give you certain attacks that have usually much higher reach, certain potentials that you couldn't do in normal combat. And all the while that's going on, you also have different blocking. There's multiple different blocking and parry mechanics in this game, depending if you're in or out of blood mode, which I find very, very cool. For example, being you can press R to block. So if you block on the moment the enemy attacks on a perfect block, you'll have a combination of two different follow-ups. So you either press Y to do the parry follow-up, or you press L, the blood Raven mode, to essentially do a special blood attack, which is really cool because I think it works really well, because while you're blocking with the R trigger, you also hold that to dodge. And so it's this really cool combination where as you're moving, dodging, activating your block, you might also accidentally block an incoming attack. And in that case, you also are constantly holding down the L button in order to activate Blood Raven attacks. So in the perfect combination, you are basically at the ready to hit that L button to activate that very special attack, which feels really good. Aside from blocking, there's also parrying, which works as when you are attacking at the same time as your enemy, which really happens more by accident rather than intentionally. And it allows you to do, again, a really nice follow-up. And I believe, the third and final one is, of course, dodging. So if you dodge at the exact right moment, then you also activate the ability for follow-up, which again are Y or L. So in total, there are 3 different parrying systems. I find it really, really interesting that they went this intense and this deep with the combat. Because the one thing I'll say about it is the combat. Sorry, excuse me. The combat has never been this refined and varied and delved into. It's very rare that in certain games, maybe not all action games, it's either like, okay, we're either dodging or we're blocking. And it kind of gives the player a choice of one or the two. And sometimes when it does both, neither of them really work. But here you can do both. You have dodging, blocking, and parrying, which is just crazy. And they all work relatively well. When you pull off a really good dodge or parry, honestly, unintentionally, it looks really cool. And that's definitely something that Platinum games, I realize, have always been known for, is that you'll go into them and you'll have no idea what you're doing, but it looks like what you're doing is really cool and really complicated. Again, the shurikens, while they're there for Yakumo, he fires them faster than Ryu, but they don't really do much damage, and they're very forgettable, to be quite honest. And of course, there's also a gauge that builds up, which is your berserk mode. So the more obliteration kills you get, which are your executions, when the enemy gets on low health and they're ready to be executed, those build up that gauge. And once that's full, you press L and R, God of War style, and you activate your super mode where you do more damage. But more importantly, whenever you do certain Blood Raven attacks in that mode, it causes a bloodbath kill, which is basically, even though it would be a normal kind of highly damaging move, even in Blood Raven mode, in Berserk mode, it's a guaranteed kill, which is really, really important for certain sections of the game where you have to do these kind of hell pandemonium levels where it's a wave after wave of enemies. It's super, super useful, depending on which item or weapon you're using. So the other thing, too, that Yakumo has over Ryu is he has a variety of weapons. I mean, Ryu did get different weapons throughout his previous games. In this game, Ryu just has his normal katana, but what he does select is the different ninpo he uses, from phoenixes, fireballs, shockwaves, all that good stuff. While Yakumo gets 4 different kinds of weapons. Again, very similar to Devil May Cry 4, where you have the mix-up of the different play styles. And so what he has is his normal, his dual wield katanas. And again, I kind of thought of the trick weapons from Bloodborne, because when you go into Bloodraven mode, the weapon also transforms as well as doing more damage. So his main weapon are two kind of reverse edged katanas that he dual wields. Again, super like classically edgy. He also has that Tokyo Ghoul mask, which I just think is just a melange of different edgy archetypes that I just love. And so when he goes into blood mode, the two katanas become one blood katana. He then has this piercing spiraled sword that when it goes into blood mode, it becomes a giant giga drill, like a Tengen Toppa kind of thing. And if you hold that during blood attacks, it'll spin and do extra damage. He also has, what was it? Oh yeah, he also gets this staff that when it goes, that's similar to like a Black Myth Wukong double-edged kind of monk kind of weapon. And when it goes into blood mode, it becomes a giant hammer. And I always thought of as King DDD from Smash Bros. And finally, the last one you get, which is my absolute favorite and something that feels a little bit overpowered even, but super, super cool, is called I just call it the Box of Terrors, because it's essentially a variety of weapons similar to Pandora's Box, again from DMC4, where it's a variety of different weapons from different time periods and whatever. You have a mace, you have giant shurikens, you have bombs, you have a slew of different things. And what really makes it the most effective weapon in the game is the fact when it does a certain attack, not only is it super, super ranged with its X attack, so you don't have to worry about enemies coming close to you or enemies too far away that are shooting you, but when it does its blood attacks, it does a huge area of damage, which, and in Berserk mode, when anything it touches, it kills. It's extremely. You also have certain accessories which you equip for, extra damage, extra defense, pretty basic stuff, as well as certain upgrades for health and other consumables that you find throughout the realm. What I really actually enjoy about this item system is that there's certain sections where Yakuma will have to do these trials, these sort of waves of enemies. And while in games like Devil May Cry, if you go into one of those trials and you end up using a bunch of items and you fail and you leave the trial, you've lost those items. What's much more fair, I feel, is that in this game, when you use a bunch of items in a trial and you fail, you actually don't save any progress. You can still do it as many times as you want until you actually get it, which I think is a lot more fair in a way. And also encourages you to use a lot of items. Another thing I realized is about halfway through this game, I also finished buying all of the moves with the ninja coins that you could possibly buy. Which are from your master or trainer Tyrann. And the rest of the time, you're going to use those coins to buy consumables, so it kind of balances out in the end. While weapon-specific moves are earned specifically from combat experience and can only be upgraded and spent the more battles you do. Along with Ryu, he has the ability to essentially find these different moves as chests on the ground, which is kind of a throwback to that style of gameplay. You, of course, have the ability to assassinate individuals, which feels really good. It will skip the entire fight by just pressing Y quickly and taking out an enemy instantly. It feels really, really nice. Of course, besides combat, there's certain platforming sections where Yakuma will press RB to either use his grappling hook to wall run on a wall, to go through an updraft, or surf along a little river or something, with the end of the game culminating in all three of these, including my favorite one, which is grinding on rails, literally like Shadow the Hedgehog. It's just really, really cool. And yeah, there's not much else really to the game. It's just a really great combat sim, or whatever you want to call it. It's a great action game, which kind of gets me to the other point, which is that while the core gameplay is so good and the game has a very strong opening, the one thing that took this experience from a 9 out of 10 to something lower is as the game goes on further, it just becomes kind of repetitive. Yes, the gameplay is really, really solid, but the story doesn't really develop too much, doesn't go in an interesting perspective. The music is consistently good throughout, but really what happens in the second chapter is that the levels just drag on, and the enemies you're fighting are fun, but not as interesting as the very first area with all the cybernetic soldiers. You're fighting mythological Tengu and dogs and these kind of zombies. Well, they call them Draugr. And it just becomes like a very repetitive kind of game, especially when they introduced the sort of demon canines. I basically ended up doing the exact same execution attack on those dogs over and over and over again because it was just became the most efficient way. There came a point in the game where I was just tired of fighting. What really was a completely awe-striking, super intense opening act gave way to a very sort of monotonous pace of a game that I just really brought it down for me. And additionally to this, the following two areas and environments with their respective shrine demons, the areas are just super kind of boring. Like the first area is kind of interesting where, the very first area of the game is the train in Neo Tokyo, which is very cool. But then after that, you're in this mountain area, and it's kind of cool, like shrines, mountains, okay. But everything is the same shade of gray, more or less. It's a giant mountain. I mean, what do you expect? And it's very realistic and just a very boring environment. And you're in it for what feels like, I think, it's roughly 6 levels. And it just drags on and on and on. And the level going after that is this mix between underground Tokyo in the sewers. And again, that is gray and dull and boring. And the other side of it, though, is that they have these little rave areas, which sound cool at first, but once you've seen one of them, they all kind of feel the same, like an underground rave scene. And then, as that repeats itself, it does add in some variety where you end up going to the Demon Realm, which is this kind of very ethereal blue style, like blue glowing, ethereal kind of area. And that's kind of cool. But again, the enemy variety in these areas is just so repetitive. It's the same blue zombies that take the same amount of hits to take, the same dogs who take the same amount of hits to take. It just gets really, really boring and really repetitive as you go through these areas. And so I never thought in an action game I'd complain about the environments, but they're really, really not that good. Another aspect to this game that I do think was kind of nifty was the mission system. So this is where, of course, you get a bunch of side quests. So as you're going through the level, the people who will say, "Hey, collect 5 things," or go off the beaten path and fight these elite 3 guys, and I'll get you extra points. It's very straightforward and pretty rewarding and very fun, and it feels really good to do them. These missions, though, there's one of them that actually has a little bit of story to it, where there's a recurring character called Oniwaka, who's a thief, a scoundrel, and eventually a demon, and you have to kind of defeat him through a recurring sort of side quest, which is kind of fun. But for the most part, this is just, again, another enemy encounter that doesn't really add anything and any new flavor to the game besides a bit of text. Another side quest that is prevalent throughout the game, which is kind of unusual, I would say, is you have to collect these small creatures called gourdies. And they're called that because they're shaped like a gourd, I guess. But it looks more like a gremlin or something out of a weird Tim Burton movie. And there's 2 types. There's one where you have to sneak up on them, and another one where you have to do a series of QTEs to catch it. And, I mean, that's kind of interesting, but it doesn't add to the story anything more than outside of just their collectible. So yeah, that's kind of the worst thing about this game, honestly. That took it from a 5 out of 5 experience to a 4 or maybe a 3, which is that it starts off so strong in the beginning, and the ending also is a pretty strong ending, but the middle part of this game, I just remember thinking, I'm legitimately bored, where it's kind of overstayed its welcome. You can have the best combat in the world, but rinsing and repeating it just feels really, really off. If I could compare it to something in Revengeance, I would say maybe the sewer level there, where it's kind of cool they introduced the new kind of gorilla-esque enemy types, but there's just certain points in the game where it's just your brain turns off, it's completely forgettable, and you don't want to be there anymore. And unfortunately, that's a very large section of the middle of this game. It kind of becomes a repetitive slog of the same kind of enemies, and that's really the really thing that kind of burns it. It's kind of weird to think that if those levels were actually shorter and they spent that time giving Ryu more levels, I think I'd have a much better impression of this game from that experience. And again, for the conclusion of the game and how it wraps up, it's pretty, I mean, kind of generic. There's not a lot of stuff really there. It's just more of that really, really good combat. And it is really good combat, believe me. And that's why I was very hesitant to compare this to Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, because even though it's essentially the same thing, a combat action game, Revengeance has a lot of great story beats, a lot of great music as well, and a lot of attitude that makes it a lot more memorable. Is this one going to be remembered as fondly as Revengeance? I really don't think so. It's kind of like almost feels like an side piece or something where it's okay, but it's again, it doesn't have the same attitude as Revenge. It doesn't have the same characters and drive, which is, kind of funny for a game that kind of says, hey, it's Ninja Gaiden, but you have a blank slate rather than adapting Metal Gear characters. Again, I had a lot of fun playing it. I think it has an amazing aesthetic, a very good soundtrack. Not as good as Rising though, but I think it's going to fail to really, I don't know, maybe have a resonance long after it came out. And this was another thing that I was very surprised by, that I remember this being announced, but having really no interest in it because I'm not a Ninja Gaiden fan. But I was very pleasantly surprised when I booted this game up, and it was as intense and as fun as it was. There was, to my mind, no hype around this game whatsoever. I didn't even know it was a platinum game until, much later, until I started playing it, and it was like, oh, okay. But yeah, it really surprised me, and I'm really happy for that surprise, that shock, that feeling of novelty. The one thing this game makes me think of is that it does feel like a truly 2025 game. This is a game that took X number of years to make or whatever, but it feels like there's progress here. This feels like a game that is the apex of, again, Platinum and Team Ninja's philosophy. Where other games, I'm just so used to playing sequels or remakes or new indie games that they're just reshading the same idea. It's like how you went from Halo 1 to Halo 2 to Halo 3. Those are all allegedly or arguably completely different games, but of the same series. Unlike things where Call of Duty, where every installment feels exactly the same. You could go all the way back to Call of Duty 2, and it would basically be the same basic mechanics, more or less. The grenade indicator and all that kind of stuff. Here, this is the one game that I've played where I thought, oh, this is actually something new, something novel, something innovative. Again, it's another peak for Platinum, and the quality is here, but it's just the other things around it, like the levels that kind of and they bog down the experience. It actually would be a better, well-received game if there was less of the middle part and more variety. But it is what it is. Anyway, it's a great game. I had a great time experience, with it, and I think it definitely belongs in, the collection of hardcore killer action games. I mean, just Platinum at this point is the only one really making these really great experiences. But, sadly, outside of that, I can't really say much else about it. It's just a great action game. But, I mean, that's it, which is fine. But, again, it could have been something really special if there was just a little bit more here. It could have been another Metal Gear Solid, Revengeance, or Rising Revengeance. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to be the case. But definitely an icon for edgy character design 101, for sure. Anyway, guys, that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. Great game, lots of fun, had a great experience, and time to move on. Anyway, I'll see you later. Bye.